the prices would go up and fewer people would be able to access those services. You wouldn't suddenly see a huge increase in Americans taking those jobs. There might be some substitution, but it would not be 100%, or if it was 100%, that could take decades, and there would be significant economic downsides in the interim.
Let's walk through a little bit of Vice President Harris's immigration policy as she's laid it out. And does it, first of all, differ significantly from President Biden's?
Well, it's certainly different from President Biden's campaign policy promises back in 2020. But from what has been put out so far, it does not differ significantly from the Biden administration's current approach. And that approach that has been developed really significantly over the last 2 years is basically what I've called the carrot and stick approach. The Biden administration is offering migrants alternate legal pathways to entering the United States, either through parole programs that people inside the United States can apply to sponsor people to come here, or through the CBP-1 app, which is a means that people can essentially get in line to go through a port of entry along the southern border. And those who don't use those tools are now being increasingly targeted for detention and deportation by the Biden administration. And we've seen the Harris administration largely adopt this, at least when it comes to the border. Inside the United States, the Biden administration is heavily pro-immigrant. Immigration enforcement is down. There are no mass raids like we saw under the Trump administration. And there's no sign I've seen that the Harris campaign is suggesting it would start those kind of mass enforcement operations again.
So is the policy working? Because we had a record number of border crossings in 2023, right?
Well, we had a record number of apprehensions. It wasn't necessarily a record number of crossings, and that is because about 20 years ago, the statistics on apprehensions were were a little bit lower because most people crossing the border made it through without being caught. Today, the southern border is blanketed in surveillance cameras. We've got tens of thousands more agents than back then, and the majority of people coming across the border are taken into custody. So apprehensions hit a record even while crossings arguably didn't. But setting that aside, numbers are down. Numbers have been down significantly this year due to two things. Due to the Biden administration reaching a deal with Mexico in late December of last year, and Mexico has now embarked on its harshest and record-setting enforcement operation, and the harshest and most record-setting enforcement operation in Mexican history. And also, the Biden administration in June began turning away asylum seekers who crossed the border between ports of entry by changing the process and raising the standard for people seeking protection. So right now, September was the lowest border apprehensions of Biden's time in office, and indeed was about at the level of summer 2020 before Trump left office.
Candidate Harris on the campaign trail constantly refers to the failure of the immigration reform legislation that she says failed in part because President Trump got on the phone and told the Republicans not to vote for it. Now, that bill, if it had gone through, what likely changes would we be seeing by today?
I think the situation, at least when it comes to the southern border, would look somewhat similar. And that's because the Biden administration's June policies adopted some parts of that bill. However, the bill itself was imperfect. It had a